Yeah.
And you.
Okay.
I love this time of year. Didn't used to. Look at city. Welcome to the second budget advisory committee meeting for 2025. We are beginning this meeting at 6:02. I do want to acknowledge we have a new member of the budget advisory committee. I'd like to welcome Chris Oda, who's representing Pleasanton City Employee Association, and replacing, and John Engelbrechtson is moving to the alternate. So with that, we're going to move to roll call. So committee member Arkin here. Committee member Bautista is out. Committee member Carlucci here. Committee member Dickey here. Committee member Exton here. Committee member Gillette here. Committee member Flo. Committee member Joel here. Committee member Oda here. Committee member Koresh. And committee member Dunbar. I'm here. With that, we're going on to the next item, which is approval of minutes. And so you all have received minutes, and you have minutes also in paper form in front of you. And I'll give you a minute or two to look over on to see if there's any corrections that need to be made. To note they are action.
It's the same document that we emailed.
Just a quick note, all the mics are off, so I want to speak, just turn on. Are there any changes that anyone has? Would with that, we're just gonna, do a quick vote. Or actually, can we have a motion?
I move to agree.
Okay. Motion by Sensible, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Carlucci. Do a quick roll call. Committee member Harkin,
Here. Yes. Yes.
committee member Carlucci,
Yes.
committee member Dickey,
Yes.
committee member Exner,
Yes.
committee member Gillette,
Yes.
committee member Jewel,
Yes.
committee member Oda,
Yes.
committee member Sensible.
Yeah.
That it passes. For the next item, we're gonna move to general public comment. During general public comment, the public may comment on items within the budget advisory committee subject matter jurisdiction, not listed on the current agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. I have one speaker card so far. If anyone else would like to speak, we have comment cards over in the front of the room. The first speaker that I have is Giacomo Demont. You can come up. Got 3 minutes. At the podium, and you have to turn the mic on.
Good evening, Budget Advisory Committee. My name is Giacomo Demonte, and I'm the Parks Division Manager. I'm here to speak on behalf of the city's Parks Division. The Parks Division maintains 46 city parks, government building landscapes, trails, open space, city-owned medians, and the city's urban forest comprised of over 23,000 trees. We also oversee cattle grazing in the open space. Safe, clean, and well-maintained parks are a vital part of a vibrant and healthy community. The city's parks are an important part of the city's identity and culture. Parks provide the opportunity for recreation for all ages and generations. Trails and open space give the opportunity for residents to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and to be out in nature. Whether visiting, working, or living in Pleasanton, the well-maintained medians convey a sense of civic pride. Even if the medians may only be seen at 40 miles per hour, they are not forgotten or neglected. The urban forest is comprised of thousands of public trees, make the city livable and provide a sense of place. They provide shade and cooling in the summer. The trees are one of the few city assets that increase in value as they get older and larger. Trees also increase property value. Carrying out annual weed abatement, mowing and disking in the open parcels, and grazing the hillsides all improve resilience to fire. Behind all these assets is a proud team of Pleasanton Parks Division employees that take a great deal of pride in the well-maintained parks and landscapes they put forward to the community. The parks team is truly part of the community. Over the years, many assets have been added to our list of maintenance items, including Bernal Community Park Phase 2, Stonewood Creek Park, Harding Park, the Transportation Corridor, One Ranch Open Space and Trail, Augustine Bernal Mountain Bike Trail, and soon the Johnson Drive and Stonewood Drive landscape improvements. All these improvements have been made without an increase in staffing. I'm hopeful we can retain the current Parks Division staff while making the necessary budget reductions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And with that, I do not have another public comment card, so I will close public comment. And move to our next item, introduce our Assistant City Manager, Pamela Ott, to talk about the independent financial assessment.
Good evening, Budget Advisory Committee. Thank you again for being here this evening. I will take a few minutes to just provide a brief overview of the independent financial assessment. that was completed by Ivy Bailey, and it was part of your packet for this evening's meeting. I will start by saying that tonight's conversation around this will be fairly brief, because this will be the subject of a city council workshop that will be held next week on Thursday, February 20th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the city council chamber. The agenda report packet for that particular workshop will be issued late tomorrow afternoon, so it will be available online for the community to have. We're trying to get ahead of the Monday holiday for folks, so that gets out there. But that's really the opportunity when Ivy Bailey, representatives who prepared the report, will be with the city council and be able to provide a much more detailed overview of the observations, findings, and recommendations that are in the report. But for your benefit, I know that we provided a memo in the packet, and we've certainly looked through that, but for the benefit of folks watching and anyone who may not have seen that, I'll hit the highlights here if I may for a few minutes. Right, so just to remind the folks who read the memo, City Council directed staff to go solicit for an independent financial assessment of the city's financial health and to evaluate the assessments of the city's financial health and evaluate the financial forecast assumptions. And so immediately, in fact, the day after the council asked it to do that, we issued a request for proposals. I'm really pleased to say that we sent that request for proposals to 9 highly qualified firms, and then we also turned around and put that. So any firm is interested in having a person. We got 5 solid submissions for that RFP. We sat and we ranked all of those submissions based on an understanding of the city's needs as provided in the RFP, their experience in providing similar services for comparable cities, the resources they had available to bring to this, because as you'll recall, the time frame was extraordinarily short for the firm that was selected to do this work, so that we could present it to you all and to the council as well. And then certainly look at references from similar engagements that they had with other cities and the cost. Based on those, that criteria and the ranking that was done, the firm that was selected was Ivy Bailey. And Ivy Bailey is a full-service CPA firm that provides traditional CPA firm services, audits, reviews, compilations, and tax, as well as management advisory services for both private sector and the government clients. They are ranked as one of the nation's top 20 accounting and advisory service firms and with over 70 years of experience serving more than 1,200 government clients. Many of those are in California. And really the meat of what we want to share with you all this evening is that based on their assessment and their review of our financial forecast assumptions, the summary, the top line of that report says that Ivy Bailey validates the city's forecasting methodology and also highlights increasing cost pressures such as wages, utilities, pension obligations, and infrastructure needs that must be addressed through proactive budget balancing strategies. So as you read in the report, there were 6 key recommendations that Ivy Bailey made. And I'll slow and I'll hold there for a moment and say, for those of you who've read the report, particularly the back, you'll recognize they went through a SWOT analysis and they made a number of observations and findings, and that's all detailed in the report. But those 6 key recommendations, just to highlight again for the group, is that they are to update the city's financial forecast to increase understanding for future budgetary decision-making. They made a recommendation to revise the city's communications approach. Really, the intent here was to simplify the presentation of financial information so that the council and particularly all members of the community could really understand what we were talking about and have equal opportunity to evaluate those budgetary requirements. They made a recommendation to develop a multi-year financial management funding plan, develop a plan for the use of pension-related trust funds and incorporate that into the financial forecast, update the city's reserve policy, and then prepare a single analysis illustrating the city's comprehensive infrastructure needs. And so looking to create as broad and comprehensive a package and a set of information for the city's financial assessment as we could. And certainly going forward, city staff has taken those recommendations, certainly understands them and intends to begin implementing them going forward in the future. And so with that, we'll stop there and ask if, particularly if there are any questions, but again, remind the back that this is going to be the content for a much deeper discussion with the council on February 20th.
Are we gonna? Well, yeah, are we gonna be able to ask questions on this list of?
Committee member Hargan, can you, turn your mic on? Thank you. And,
Okay. So there's a list of proposed cuts we're gonna have to rank, right? So are we gonna be able to ask questions on some of this, and when's the appropriate time to do that?
Yes, certainly. So after we discuss the IDBL report, answer any, questions that you have tonight, then the bulk of our meeting this evening will be about that list of reductions. And that will be, you'll have ample opportunity for us to walk you through it, ask all of your questions, and then conduct an exercise with that so we can really understand where the advisory committee is.
Thank you.
I had a clarifying question. Is this the time to ask questions about the Ida Bailey results?
yes, that's correct. So this is the appropriate time to ask questions, then we'll go to public comment and then do a round of comments as well.
No further questions.
Good to be with you all this evening. I'm the city manager. And I'm just gonna handle a couple of slides here before we jump into the.
Sorry, Jerry, real quick, we gotta move to public comment and then.
Oh,
close
okay,
the
I'll
item.
color each piece of this?
Yes.
All right.
So for the financial forecast piece, I'm gonna open public comment. If anyone, that's joining us, the public would like to speak on this item, please, fill out the speaker card, bring it to me, or stand up and see that motion. Looking like there's no one that's wanting to speak on this item, I will close public comment, and begin the next one.
All right, thank you. Take two. So, yeah, glad to be with you in person this evening. This is a really important process that we're working through for the city of Pleasanton. It's not the most, it is not fun. It is a really difficult time as we work on addressing some structural issues with our operating budget. And so what I'm going to do this evening is really speak to the process and maybe get into a little bit of the content, but I'm going to leave the majority of that for the reduction list that has been developed. So we're looking at a two-phase process at this point in time. We have two phases that we've described on the slide, and I'll just elaborate on them a little bit because I think it'll help to frame the work that the committee needs to do in the near term to help us get to a two-year budget during the next few months. And then hopefully you all will want to stick around and help us to continue to work on a longer-term financial stability plan for the city. And so in the near term, we're focused on reducing spending. It's the thing that we have the most control over and the thing that we're able to manage most reasonably in the next couple of years. There are short-term revenue options that we'll discuss, and I'll touch on a few of those things that we've been working on in the next couple of slides. And then what I want you to help us with tonight is to maybe even start to create a bit of a parking lot for the things that we think we should be doing over the next 18 months or so after the budget is developed, with the goal of having a 3 to 5 year plan that we can execute to really change the trajectory that we're on with both revenues and expenses. And so when I talk about this 3 to 5 year plan and the work that goes into that, we listed a few things here, municipal service review, sometimes it's called a management review, where we look at the services and the programs that the city provides. We look at the efficiencies that exist in the organization or potential inefficiencies, and we really take a deep dive into that work. The pension costs and pension opportunities for just different strategies to address those needs over time is something that we have not taken the time over the years. We have a 115 trust, that is one tool, but there is another whole toolbox of pension strategies that cities explore to be able to address their long-term pension costs. I hear questions, a lot of folks are asking me about, overtime and how we manage our overtime costs. There are a lot of things that are built into how overtime happens, including vacancies and staffing levels. And so when I look at recruitment and retention, overtime opportunities for cost savings, there's also a lot of questions about whether we could contract services and things like that. So those things are not going to be figured out here in the next couple of months. And what I'd like to do is have your help to create a bit of a parking lot and some opportunities in those areas. And with that, I'll go to the next slide. All right. Thank you. And I'll just talk about our 2-year budget development process. We've been reducing spending here in the city of Pleasanton for the last couple of years. But really for the last year, we really hit the brakes hard on our spending, which has helped us to save some money. But obviously, it also has created some impacts. And so that's what we need your help with. When there's, an employee with a seat empty on both sides of them, or, the truck's not full that day, it has operational impacts and it's not sustainable. We're also not spending on some major vehicle and equipment replacement that we need to do as an organization. And so we're dealing with the operating budget, but there are facilities, vehicles, equipment, repair and replacement, and a whole host of other funding needs that also need to be addressed. So what we're going to be dealing with tonight is about a $10 million average annual gap for the coming 2-year budget. So $10 million in each year. And I've heard questions in the community about where did $10 million come from? Haven't we been talking about $13 million? And the reality is, when you look at the financial forecast over the projection period or the forecast period, it's a $13 million average annual structural deficit over that period of time. So some years it's up, some years it's down, but on average it was $13 million. What we've done for simplicity's sake at this point, because the forecast shows a 10.8 and an $11.8 million deficit for the next 2 years, is bring it into the $10 million range. We've created a menu of options with about $14.7 million of potential reductions. That's work that's been done by every city in the department. As I said at the town hall that happened earlier this week, there's no finger on the scale. There were no sacred cows. We asked every department to contribute, and our internal service departments have a lot less capacity to contribute. Their budgets in some cases are in the single-digit millions, whereas public safety, public works, some of our larger departments are obviously double-digit. So there's just varying degrees of opportunity to contribute with the reductions, but what we've done is $14.7 million list to start this conversation, to start this exercise or this process. Of that $14.7 million, we have identified about $3.3 million of things that I would call more operational or administrative service support. Those dollars are things that we will very likely be recommending and would start to eat into the $10 million, leaving us about $7 million to really dig in on tonight. And we can unpack the operational, the $3.3 million. I was talking with the committee member Exner earlier this evening. We do things like we have an FAA consultant, and people say, well, why are you paying for an FAA consultant? We have a lot of residents who are impacted by Livermore Airport and noise issues, leaded fuel concerns. And so, when you're trying to convince a neighboring city who runs an airport that they need to make changes to their airport operations, you bring in an expert who operates portable airports and for communities on these issues. And it's been really helpful for us as we've navigated with the Air Board and other decision-making bodies. It's been effective, but it's a significant contract cost every year. And we do something similar with a group called Towns and Public Affairs. We have some lobbying work that we do for issues important to Pleasanton in Sacramento. Not every city does that as a standalone city. And so there are a number of things like that that we're proposing to remove from the city's budget as we consider some of these other operational impacts. And so we're gonna attack the $3.3 million a little bit further. So right now, for the sake of the discussion this evening, we're asking you to look at the $14.7 million list, help us with about $10 million worth of reductions. And that's really how we're planning to spend the bulk of our time this evening.
Can I ask a question about that? You had mentioned that we're not gonna look at overtime or contract. That seems like that there could be some potential savings there. What would be the reason for not looking at that?
There are operational impacts that we need to unpack. So there's a couple of things that back into overtime. Are the way that workers' compensation impacts overtime is an important factor, as well as some of the things that we have built into our existing labor contracts. And so those are not things that we're going to be able to address and fix in the next 2 months. But certainly things that we know we can look into and have further conversation about. We don't have the public safety overtime is probably the more significant component of our overtime budget. When we have parks employees or public works employees, it's usually related to an emergency situation or an on-call kind of a situation. It's just a much lower piece of the, or a smaller piece of the overtime budget.
As we talk about infrastructure needs, for example, we talked about $900 million over 10 years. In discussing retirement and pensions, we state over 200 million in unfunded liabilities. Is there a time frame, for example, on the infrastructure needs over 10 years that we're looking at with the pensions and retirement?
Can you maybe clarify the question? The time frame is for the, sorry, I know we're getting a lot of feedback in the room, but the $900 million was a high level assessment of our state of good repair needs for our infrastructure and facilities. And so that was over 10 years. It wasn't exactly 50-50, but about half of it was general fund and about half of it was enterprise fund. Those numbers are getting bigger and clearer as we complete the water system management plan and the citywide asset management plan. And so we started there a couple of years ago with $900 million, and I can guarantee you the number will be larger as we finish asset management in totality, but also look specifically at our water system and our wastewater system.
And then with the retirement or pension funds, I'm curious if there's a time frame that we're looking at, like how the infrastructure needs was just an example that there was a time frame of 10 years. Is there a time period we're looking at for retirement and pensions?
There's not. It's based on actuarial reports. So number of employees, how long they're going to live, how much they're compensated, safety, non-safety, or miscellaneous safety is how it gets classified. And that's really the duration of the pension costs. And we have an actuary coming on March 4th to talk at the city council, and we'll get into exactly that. You know, how does the liability look? How does it work not just for pension, but for other post-employment benefits, which is essentially healthcare for the city. So it is not a 10-year period. It's a much longer time horizon, but there is a peak to that because of the CAPRO system that was put in place to cap pensions for public employees. And we'll see that peak sometime. I'll never put a pin in the calendar, but in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you.
That's a question. So we'll be advising council on choices for reductions in operations. And like the individual items on the list. So does council tell the city how to spend the money and how much, like how to divvy it up in which departments it goes to? How is what we're telling council, how are they deciding on what happens to reduce money? I'm sorry if that's vague. No, it's not a vague question, and I'll be really specific. The Budget Advisory Committee is advising, is a component of the community input that's happening. What happens is all of that will be taken into account. We're gonna give you some information about what happened at the town hall this week, and hopefully this will become an iterative process that leads to what is ultimately the city manager budget recommendation to the city council. It's a council manager form of government. Staff, working with our finance director and many others around the table, develops a budget. That budget is then presented to the city council with potentially alternatives. Likely this time around, there'll be some alternative analysis. And the council are the policymakers and the final decision makers on how money is spent. So it is very much a process that builds to a final staff recommendation, again, likely with alternatives this time, which will then be considered by the city council.
Thanks.
All right, so I just have a couple more slides, and I know I'll turn it over because the meat of the presentation tonight is really elsewhere. Okay, so we have been looking at revenue options. I just want to make sure that it's really clear that we have taken some steps to increase revenue recently. Our development impact fees hadn't been increased since 2018. That's a fairly normal cycle. It's about every 5 years or so that work has been done, and it doesn't necessarily. It's a very small portion of the overall budget, but every little bit helps. Our master fee schedule gets updated on an annual basis. We're looking harder at those fees and making sure that things like field use that have been free for a long time we're starting to put some dollars into. Again, nowhere near cost recovery, but helping to move us in the right direction. Credit card usage fees, that's about a $200,000 general fund positive impact, $200,000 to our enterprise funds. So that's a recent step. Sponsorship policy creates some new opportunities for support. Public art creates opportunities for some really, I'll call it discretionary spending, but public art's a really important piece of how communities see themselves and create public spaces. And so, just some recent focus brought to these topics, but others are coming, and this will be an ongoing effort.
What do these add up to?
All variable, so the master fee schedule depends on how people.
It's like high level for all of them. If those were all implemented, what would they add up to?
For example, the use fees is about $60,000 every year.
If we were to take all 5 of those.
It would be
and implemented, what would be
Right.
net revenue be?
So I just want to point out that for the development impact fee, right, is for non-general funds. It helps the city as a whole, but the money does not come into the general fund directly. So credit card fee is about $200,000, fuel fee is about $60,000. For sponsorship policy, it's hard to predict, the income, right? It all depends on the negotiation, right? With the sponsor, organizations.
Yeah, so Brian, if I could, Brian, it's all very variable. So development impact fees depend on whether or not things are getting built in the community. The sponsorship policy, we've never had a sponsorship policy at the city of Pleasanton. We have done sponsorships, but we've never had a framework to do that under and to go and to solicit. Sponsorship is something that we would like to do for city facilities. Correct, brand new, the sponsorship policy. The percent for public art comes off of development as well. It's essentially another impact fee. And so it's going to be variable depending on the amount of activity that's happening in the community. And it's going to be, most of these are for a specific purpose, except for the master fee schedule, which is very much a general fund offset, but to give you the specific example, as Susan mentioned, that we're anticipating about $60,000 a year. It's nominal. Yeah. But it is a step in the right direction, and it's something that we haven't had in the past. Okay, so
Regarding the developer impact piece, are we actively going after businesses and, potential new, business people to have in Pleasanton?
we do. We have an economic development strategic plan, and we're in constant contact in the form of our Workday partners today. We're making some reductions, but are also doing a lot of investing in our community. And so it's an ongoing effort, but it is an area that we'll likely be spending more time on. The city council last year, I believe, adopted our economic development strategic plan update, which really has some specific action items and tasks for us to accomplish here in the next couple of years. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, okay, so I really wanna, I'm gonna push through here because I'm gonna steal all your time otherwise, and you all are gonna be frustrated with me at the end, so, so the one-time money side of things is something that's, you're also gonna have in the back of your mind, right? So how do we address our budget situation? There are some tools that will exist that will be bringing more information to the council. I mentioned earlier, March 4th, we'll have an actuary come in and we'll talk about using OPEB and pension trust, dollars. There will be a recommendation, there will be scenarios and options, and there'll be pros and cons discussion of using those dollars as part of our budget balancing exercise. The other piece of this is capital investments. For many years now, we've been underinvesting in our capital and infrastructure. And that is a tool that we could continue to use. It's not best practice. It's not prudent to continue to not invest in your facilities and infrastructure at the level that we need to. And so those will be things that the city council will consider as part of the budget process. We're not going to ask you to weigh in tonight because we don't have our actuary information yet. We may be back to you before we make that final recommendation to give you some of the same information that the council will see on March 4th. We're just working through the schedule and logistics of that right now. But know that these tools do exist. If we talk about $14.5 million tonight and we share a $10 million scenario or two, or we come to a conclusion on $10 million, which may or may not happen tonight, but we look at that level of reduction, the council will have some other tools that could further reduce those impacts that they'll be considering as we move through the budget development process. So the city council did create 4 fiscal principles or priorities, and so I want to share those with you this evening. They're important as you do your work or dig into these topics. The first one is community engagement and equity. We're on the road with this now. We've got at least 5 meetings over the next few weeks, including the town hall that happened last night and this meeting tonight. The long-term fiscal stability of the city is something that we are working toward. We have identified a number of things that we need to be doing to work toward that, including our asset management plan, our long-term financial forecast, and really getting into the things that we can afford and how we're going to continue to pay for them. Infrastructure investment, we've talked about that already tonight, and then protecting core services and essential services. And what I will say to you and what you will get into tonight and what you'll hear from community members as you circulate is everyone's definition of essential and core is different. And it is the crux of, and it's the hardest part of what we're doing. And it's probably the hardest job for the city council as we come into a time where we're trying to really adjust our spending consistent with our revenue. And so with that, I'm going to conclude my comments for this evening. We're going to turn it back to the staff team, but I'll see if there's any questions about anything that I've said so far tonight. And if not, I'll mostly go into listening mode for a lot of meeting. That will turn it back.
All right, good evening. I'm Alexa Jeffress. I'm the Deputy City Manager. I'm going to walk us into the next portion of the evening. This is where we're going to spend most of our time tonight. And it's going to involve an overview. I'm going to first walk you through all the reduction proposals that you have in your packet. This is the list of potential program and service area reductions. And so we're going to walk through that. We're going to have some time for questions in each program and service area. We have all of our staff from all our city departments here available to answer questions. And then for the last portion of this item, we're going to actually ask you to engage in an interactive activity that will involve doing some work, doing some math on worksheets that we'll hand out, and then coming over and registering your votes over here on the wall. So before I get into the activity, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each of the different descriptions of the program and service areas. I know you got a really detailed overview at your first meeting last month, where you heard from each of our city departments about the programs and services they provide, budget overview, and staff. So really the purpose in sharing this, these slides this evening is to show that for the purposes of what we're calling the program and service reduction exercise, we've organized it by program and service area, which is a little bit different from organizing it by department. And the reason for that is that some of our programs and services touch multiple city departments. So the first section we're going to talk about is what we call internal services and operational support. As Jerry mentioned, this is where that bucket of recommendations is coming from, that really deals with how we handle our internal operations. So this, what we call operational support, includes a number of internal service organizations in the city, including the city council, the city manager's office, the city attorney's office, and the city clerk's office. So the city manager's office oversees operations. It includes our economic development team, as well as our team of one individual, as well as our emergency management division. It also includes the city attorney's office, who provides legal counsel, and the city clerk's office that oversees our public records, our elections, and all of our council meetings. It also includes the administrative support services that help the organization function, including finance, HR, IT, and I already mentioned economic development. So we have about $3.3 million in proposed reductions, as Jerry mentioned in this portion, as City Manager Bowden mentioned in his presentation. And these are, the way we're framing these is these are really places where the city staff, the city internal organization and internal support functions, we've looked at all of our operating costs across all of our city departments that provide internal services. And we've looked for places where we can make reductions that we really intend to recommend to the city council as part of our budget recommendation. So this is less focused on what we consider programs and services to the community and more focused on how our internal organization runs. So we have this organized into 3 categories: further reducing general admin costs. This includes things like, travel and training, software, looking for efficiencies in how our IT department manages different software licenses across the organization. And it also includes some accounting items like interfund transfers in our public works department, really to ensure that we're assigning costs off of the general fund and to other special funds that might be available, such as enterprise funds. It also includes reducing professional services and contracts. Jared talked about this already. This is like our FAA consultant for airport advocacy, and then what we call internal personnel adjustments. So this is looking at opportunities to freeze or eliminate positions that provide administrative support or services, including the deputy city manager position, which is me, which some people asked about. The reason for that is that our assistant city manager is planning to retire later this year. And so that will allow us to freeze one of our positions. So that is a significant reduction in staffing for the city manager's office that provides operations. So I'll pause there. Yeah, we're planning to pause in each section, so that'll give you a few minutes to ask questions. So yeah, we can pause if you have questions about what goes into this section.
Can you hear me? Does this include like regional organizational fees, maybe like League of California Cities, things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have different, so if we were to reduce funds in that area, it would come out of this bucket of funding, because we do have, in addition to all the internal service departments, we have a fund category called non-departmental that sort of broadly supports city organizations across the city. So that's a place where some of these membership fees could probably be housed. I think League of California Cities is probably in the city council budget, but I could be wrong.
How much is
It's
it?
non-departmental, yeah.
And so the answer to your question is, no, we are not recommending that we cut the League of California Cities budget. There's a few different reasons for that. There are other organizations that we are considering removing ourselves from in this list.
So I understand where we're going. Are you gonna look to us to say, okay, get rid of that bucket, get rid of this bucket, kind of at this high level? Is that what your strategy is?
Yeah, so the questions that you're asking, will be asking for you to give us sort of feedback on how to move forward. Yes, I think when we get to the exercise, we'll be putting this in the mix, the internal services reductions, and ask you to weigh in on whether you would support advancing these recommendations. And Assistant to the City Manager, Adam Zavala, is handing out a worksheet now, so you can follow along and take notes. We thought that might be helpful as we move through this portion and prepare for the exercise. The handout you're receiving is identical to the one that was included in the back packet that was distributed and that's publicly available online. It's just the list of program and service reduction proposals that allows you to keep track and follow along.
Yeah, well, this is probably the most general bucket that you'll see. Most of the other line items, as we reviewed the packet, there's a lot more specificity. The reason we started with this one is because it's a big number. There's a lot of things rolled up in it. And frankly, there's a lot of operational impacts, like reducing, we call it central services, but we have like our clerk's office has a big printer contract, and we do all of our big print jobs in one place, and we would be eliminating that and farming it out to our departments, which creates, it's different work happening in different places, but it's an operational efficiency that hopefully it'll be an efficiency, but it's definitely a nice to have for us right now, and things like that are in those big buckets, and if we lined it all out for you, it would be sheets and sheets, because these are a bunch of little things and some big things that add up to $3.3 million.
When you talk about reduction there, on this whole call,
You turn on your. Thank you.
on the, we talk about reduction, this reduction against prior year or reduction against the last budget iteration?
So the reductions that are proposed here, these are just proposed reductions, and these are for the next 2-year budget. So these are looking at the next two fiscal years that are included in the biennial budget. Does that answer the question?
So in comparison to what we're incurring now,
Yes, it's in comparison to the current fiscal year, and it's looking at how we can reduce these expenses going forward over the next 2 fiscal years. Yeah.
thank you.
So the 1.9 is a 1-year number or a 2-year number? Just to get
It's
clarity.
a per year, yeah, it's a 1-year number, so it'd be 1.9 per year.
So I was going to ask along the lines of that, with the reduction. It still allows you a foundational number to do your work, just bringing it back to the other level. Okay, thank you. And if I could, Jerry, when you mentioned the things like contracts, like if the FAA thing came up, are there one-offs that can be done if need be? So it just would be a ongoing contract.
Yeah, there sure are. I mean, we'll want to break this down at some point, but for the simplicity of the conversation tonight, we rolled these ones up because I think these are more internal, and they'll have operational issues they'll create some few challenges for us to overcome. But these are things that we think we can work through. A lot of the other things that you're gonna see are service impacts, community impacts, and that's really where we would love your help in this exercise. These are not, none of these are really put on the list, and so that's the meat of it.
Thank you. And last one, and thank you for the explanation. I said, because I thought, I said, wow, she's talking about herself here. Are these other than that, are these currently unoccupied positions? Because it says that this will, it will not affect personnel, so that means maybe they're open positions, that kind of thing.
I'd like to ask earlier. Okay, so this is a great question, and the answer is we have a lot of vacancies right now. We've frozen a lot of positions. We're holding things while we come through this process. We're gonna do our best to make sure that we make good use of those vacancies as we come through the reduction discussions. It doesn't mean that we won't impact existing occupied positions, but because we've been freezing for a year now, there's I believe across the organization, currently we have 21 open spots.
Thank you.
Question about professional services and contracts. Does that include consulting services? Yeah, it does. It's just not, it doesn't eliminate every contract that we have.
So $450,000 savings per year. Can you give us a total number of this budget?
A total number for contracts?
Professional services and contracts.
I can't sit in here right now, but we can get that for you.
Yeah, so it's a good question. We can look into that and we can run the numbers because this is an amalgamation of contributions from different city departments. We saw on the previous slide, there's, about 8 different departments that contribute into this piece. Actually, this includes some professional services and contracts from all city departments, so it's actually big, more than 8. So it's not, we don't have a discrete number for that citywide, because this is many line items from every city department that contributed it. But we could probably calculate that if we tried.
If I were to look in the 2-year budget, the previous 2-year budgets, does that fall under the materials and supplies line?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have any more questions on? So as Jerry said, we are going to head into the program and service reduction portion of the discussion. And as we go into this, I do want to preface this, as Jerry just said, this is a really challenging discussion to have. It's really challenging for our community. And I'm going to share later on in the presentation, the preliminary results from the town hall we had here earlier this week. But it's really challenging for the city organization and for all of the departments that provide these programs and services to the community as well. And as we discussed, these are all, programs and services that are provided by really excellent city staff working to deliver these services. So just framing that, as Jerry said, when we get into the program and service reductions, this is an exercise. These are things that were submitted from every city department. We requested reduction proposals citywide, and these are just proposals at this point. In order to go through this exercise of analyzing and understanding some potential recommendations that could be passed through to the city manager and the council. So we have police and fire group next, as our public safety departments. They provide a number of services that we know the community really values, and they're critical to the health and well-being of the community. And we have a number of reduction areas here. I think as we discussed previously, there is a significant portion of our city's expenditure budget is on public safety. So there's some larger items here, including the reducing special enforcement investigation units. This is a reduced focus on certain types of special investigation valued at about $400,000. Reducing or eliminating school resource officers, which we call SROs, which provide a benefit to our school district. And helping interact with the students there and sort of divert what could otherwise become emergency calls to be more non-emergency or to be handled without escalation. Reducing or eliminating our alternative response unit, or ARU. Again, this is a very valued program for the community. It's award-winning. It received a Helen Putnam Award recently, and it's provided in Pleasanton with a combination of city staff and contract clinicians. Reducing support for non-emergency calls, so diverting those funds, which could impact police officers' time in terms of requiring more officers to respond to non-emergency incidents. Reducing funding for a variety of police special programs, including our K9 program, SWAT training and equipment. And then on the fire side, there's just one line item that has to do with the nature of how sort of the fire stations are staffed and sort of the way and it's worth noting too that in Pleasanton, our fire department is actually a joint powers authority with Livermore. So we do share a number of operational costs in the city of Pleasanton. We have 5 fire stations, so that would close 1 Pleasanton fire station at a total cost reduction value of about 1.15 million. But it's also worth noting when we talk about the impacts that this could cause an increase in fees from neighboring cities, because we could receive service calls that we're not able to respond to due to our reduced number of stations, which could then cause us to have to pay fees to neighboring cities in order to answer those calls for service.
So we don't think that's a net 1.1 million.
Yes, that number is unknown. Yes, the fees that we called it out because that number, we know that there could be the potential for those fees, but that number is unknown at this time.
No, it's net. It actually is net. So the total savings is about $1.5 to $1.6 million. And that number anticipates some amount of offset to Livermore as part of their half the JPA and Alameda County Fire. Yeah, we don't know how much they will want to purchase, but we've made an estimate.
Could you speak a little bit to the school resource officer? So I'm assuming from 2 to 1, that's the high school. There's one in high school, is that right?
They move around, so that, yes, that is correct, but they also spend time in our middle schools and, Chief Boars here as well as Captain Schlegelberg. And so we'll turn it over to them to talk about how the SRO program gets implemented currently.
Okay, so the question is, where are they located?
Well, that was my first one, and the second was what kind of things do they engage?
So when there is someone in a school, you get to know the school, you get to know the staff, you get to know the students. You can really bring things down that could potentially, if they are going in a certain direction, say, the police department is called and it's someone that they don't know and they don't know the school. So that's one really great benefit. You get to know people's temperament, like some kids, you know the kid and they can talk. So it's just really it gets the traffic issues around the schools, anything involving the schools that you can really have a finger on before it becomes a problem. And it's not just the high schools, it's all of the schools. Does that help?
Even the grade schools, like all of them?
Yes.
Wow, thank you.
Do you have any other questions on police and fire? Yes. We go to the next one.
On the fire station, is that a building number, or is that operating the fire station or rebuilding the fire station?
So good evening, I'm Joe Tessier, Fire Chief. The number we put forward was basically the personnel costs of reducing, thank you, of reducing one of Pleasanton's 5 fire stations. So each station is staffed by 1 crew. And so we closed the station and 9 people would not be at that station anymore, 3 per day, 24-hour shifts. It doesn't build in any facility costs. I think our hope would be that it would be a brownout and not a permanent closure where we could dissolve the assets.
Excuse me, so if we close the station, those 9 people rotate to the other stations, or are those slots reduced?
No, that would be a reduction in daily staffing in Pleasanton. That's where the savings comes, is from the personnel reduction.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions on the public safety portion? All right, moving on to planning and building and parks, streets and facilities. So this is the services provided by our community development and our public works departments around land use and planning, transportation, traffic management, housing, and then infrastructure and parks, streets and environmental sustainability. So the proposed reductions here are divided into 2 program areas. The first is planning and building, and there are several areas here. So this is primarily provided by our community development department, which would handle building permitting, as well as plan checking and some long range planning. So the reductions here is to reduce consultant support for plan checking, long range planning and permitting. It's estimated that this could increase turnaround time for plan submittal processing and plan review by just around 5 business days, but it could yield around just shy of $500,000 per year in savings. Another option is reducing our in-person permit counter service. It's currently closed 1.5 days a week. That's part of the current sort of reductions and cost saving measures that we've already put in place in the current fiscal year. But the proposal is that could be reduced by an additional 1 day per week or to 2.5 days. This could potentially increase wait and processing times for permit applications. Eliminating our neighborhood traffic calming program. So this is what they call speed humps or speed bumps on the program to work with neighborhoods in Pleasanton to request those in your community. And then finally eliminating the sustainability manager position, which would impact our ability to meet our climate action plan goals. I'll go through without questions. So again, a very difficult item to put on the list, but a large impact item is to potentially close the Dolores Banks Aquatic Center. This would yield significant savings, 1.2 million, through a combination of impacts from, the reduction in operation and maintenance costs. It's a fairly costly facility, but also significant staffing, including, a lot of temporary and part-time staffing during the summer months that staff that aquatic center. Another option is reducing janitorial services at city parks and facilities, which would obviously impact the sort of quality and cleanliness of those parks and facilities and may cause us to close park restrooms sometimes, or, on a permanent or semi-permanent basis, but again, could yield significant savings of up to $700,000. Reducing park and trail maintenance, so less frequent mowing and watering. It could include closing some neighborhood parks. This would help us meet our water conservation goals, but sort of reduce the sort of appearance, quality, cleanliness of our parks, which we know is something that the community really values here in Pleasanton, and something that is really remarkable about our community. Just shy of $1 million, reducing landscaping services citywide, so decreasing maintenance on things like medians, tree trimming, the fall leaf pickup program, and then finally updating city sidewalk and maintenance obligations to shift some of that responsibility for eligible sidewalks to property owners, which is something that's done in other jurisdictions. So I'm going to pause there. This is a large category between planning and building and park streets and facilities, and see if there are any questions.
I have a question. When we talk about reducing maintenance, like you mentioned earlier, I think something about vehicle maintenance, about those. So it seems like you may be saving a little bit of money now, but you're gonna be costing more money in the future, because if you don't do an oil change on a car, right? Yes, you save the maintenance this month, but in a year, now you need a new engine, which is much more expensive. If you don't paint a structure, right, in 2 or 3 years from now, you're gonna have to spend much more money to mitigate the damage, not by having to paint it. We talk about that type of deferred maintenance.
Good evening. My name is Chinyo, Director of Public Work. Unfortunately, yes, all of the list of items here is basically deferring short-term maintenance and taking care of whether or not it's vehicle or parks or building of facilities and defer it to long-term. So yes, you are right. We are deferring the short-term to try to save some money short-term, but it will have long-term effect.
It'll cost more long-term to fix it.
Yeah, yes.
So if I could also add to that, thank you, Director Young. There's similar implications with closing our planning and building counter, right? You save money, but it also comes at the expense of potentially future economic development or helping our residents get their homes built, which increases their addition done, which could increase assessed value. There are implications associated with all of these decisions. The issue for us in the near term is that we don't have a lot of opportunity for meeting our expense side of the balance sheet. And so the idea here is to reduce these costs and then to get into that 3 to 5 year plan to be able to more proactively address some of these other long-term implications. But great point.
Under planning and building, says 5 extra days turnaround. What's the turnaround now?
Yeah, I'm Jennifer Miller with the Community Development Department. I did get some information from our building official and anticipating this question. So just some examples of current turnaround times for residential additions. So, you're adding a bathroom or you're adding an ADU to your home. Initial submittal currently is about 3-week turnaround, so I changed it to 4. Resubmittals a bit shorter, 2 weeks and then 1 week. So it would add an additional 5 days to each of those. And like commercial tenant improvements, those come up a lot. Initial submittal, also 3 weeks, 4 weeks would increase to 4 weeks under this proposal.
Thank you. And if I may, on park streets and facilities, so some of the things we talked about reduction. Why? Can you explain the thinking, why close the pool completely rather than reduce it?
For the pool, there's two parts to it. It's an aging infrastructure, so as of now, there's already a very high maintenance cost. In order to operate it the way that we operate it now, with the schedule that we operate now, it costs us roughly about $630,000 just to operate, to maintain it. And with the upcoming asset management study, we already anticipate that it's going to have a good list of items that we need to replace, because that facility has not been attended to for some time. And it's at an age that, at a time that we need to have major capital improvement.
Thank you. And on a couple of the other ones where they have multiple things in them. So like to reduce landscaping services, could you say, we're not going to reduce vegetation maintenance, but we can eliminate the fall leaf pickup, or with a park janitorial, like I know Aquatic Park can overflow in a day. I have a small park across from me that, like, it might take a week for it to fill up. So has that been accounted for, the differences in the parks and how much trash accumulates?
Yes, we have looked at that, on each of the item, it has a breakdown of list of items that roll up to this, summarized list. But for all the items that in each of the lists, we did look at for every park, how much can we reduce the service and what would it impact?
And can we cut out the pickup of the leaves? But we have leeways, but keep the vegetation maintenance.
Definitely the dollar value will change.
Okay, all right, thank you.
If I could, yeah, are we
I
gonna?
was just gonna say, on the question about the pool and closing the pool, it's a little more complicated too, because there's a significant staffing component, and especially when we talk about how recreation programs are run. I'm gonna ask our Parks and Recreation, our Library and Recreation Director, Heidi Murphy, to come up and talk a little more to that, because there is an important, it's helpful to understand how these programs are staffed.
Yeah, so recreation's a little bit trickier than a lot of areas that we're looking at, because we generate revenue through our programs, but our programs are heavily subsidized by the general fund. So we offset by, 30, 40, 50%. And so you have to grab enough people to get a cost savings. I think, well, maybe I shouldn't go that direction. This is a proposal that I think would be really hard for the community. The pool is heavily used. We have about 85 temporary staff out there, 3 permanent staff out there. We have a lot of competitive swim teams out there. We have a lot of seniors who use the facility who can't exercise anywhere else. It's a well-loved community asset. And again, it's a big staff team, and it takes a lot. And the biggest cost though is the maintenance. And so you don't save a ton by reducing hours. You really only get the big savings by taking the whole pie. That said, pools can't just sit there empty. So there are costs that we have not assessed yet about what it would take to do that. They probably some significant capital costs at the beginning to do something like this.
So since the pool is very popular in the community, and since it is subsidized, what angle can we approach that the community pays for the use of the pool?
Yeah, so we currently charge fees. So everyone who uses that facility pays. We assess our fees regularly, and they are within our approved city council master fee schedule, but that's something that council could reconsider. We could look at increasing fees to offset. And we don't currently include maintenance in our cost recovery so we could fold that into, we could start charging renters for maintenance fees for the lanes. We can, there's a lot that we could look at fee wise, but not enough to offset the costs.
I guess why not? I mean,
Why would, if the public wants to have the pool and they're willing to pony up the money to keep all the programs there, why would we not increase the associated fees?
We just increased fees for lap swim and water exercise and got a lot of feedback from the community that it was difficult. So water aerobics went from $10 a session to 12, and a lot of people were pretty upset about that. And our lap swim went up $1 per lap swim. And so I think it's difficult because, you know, one of the things cities do is provide a low cost option for people to access, right? You can't afford Bay Club, maybe, so you're gonna come to the Loris Bankston Aquatic Center and swim laps. So it's kind of tricky there, but it is definitely something to look at.
But it has to be approved by the city council.
Correct.
So that is not on the table for discussion here, I guess.
We will be bringing an update to our master fee schedule, for recreation later this year, probably June-ish, with some of those considerations of moving things up a little bit.
Can I maybe add, because I think Director Murphy hit the nail on the head, you know, for as much as some of these programs cost, the city exists to provide a lot of these kinds of resources. Parks don't pay for themselves, pools don't pay for themselves, but they are community amenities, and they are a large part of what we do, and it's why you know, we're not a private enterprise. We do have enterprise funds, but we're not a business. And so the reason that things have gotten a little challenging is because we haven't collected what other cities around us have collected over the years for a lot of the things that we do. We're moving in that direction, but there's a rate of change that the community can absorb. And so again, I think putting those kinds of more significant fee increases into the 3 to 5 year, the longer term stability plan, and moving in that direction with communications and being able to put fees into place over time is going to be really important. And so it's challenging in the context of a 2-year budget with a few months here to get to a finish line, to be able to anticipate those revenues, because frankly, for our elected officials who are mostly here in the room this evening, and as Director Murphy mentioned, it's not easy to put higher fees on things that people are used to paying for today.
I guess no disagreement there, but either it's that or we're gonna shut down. So that's the part that I'm struggling with, balance.
Yeah, and it's, there are certain facilities that are on or off to be able to achieve the savings, and so that is part of the situation we're working through.
So similar to the firehouse conversation, is that net? With, like you said, if the pool is closed, but you still gotta keep water in it and chemicals.
This would be, it's gone completely. So this is all maintenance costs, all operations costs, all staffing costs are gone. We have not assessed what it would cost to fully shut down that. So those are not included in there.
That's the difference is really one-time money versus ongoing money. What you're seeing here, for the vast majority of these are ongoing savings.
There's a question for Director Murphy we just, at the last city council meeting, I believe we approved raising the cost for teams to use the sports park.
We did, yes, we just are starting to, we've never charged them previously.
It's been blessed, but it's going to start. So are we now proposing that we're going to lock the bathroom?
Oh, this is at the parks. My guess would be this would not be at the parks that are heavily used, like the sports parks. This is a Public Works proposal here, but I believe this would be certain parks that are not heavily used. So I would imagine we're skipping sports park and we're not. Oh, okay, I'll let her answer.
No, the proposal is to shut down all the park restrooms. It says may close is that we are gonna have maintain a minimum schedule for park restroom. When it is not usable, it will be locked.
So as a former soccer coach, I really I really protest that one, but are we talking about just the sports park? Are there bathrooms at other locations that we're talking about also?
It's a restroom in all the parks, because right now we have services to all the parks. Every day we have people to go check it and make sure that it's clean, it's usable, paper is filled. So it's usable every day, 7 days a week. With a budget cut, it will be the bathroom, we'll still service it, but it will be once a week. And if it is not usable, people vandalize it or get too dirty, then we'll lock it.
And just to be clear, there is a minimum, this concept allows for some restrooms to be open during key times. It's not a complete elimination, and we do have, community parks which have restrooms and neighborhood parks which do not. So think about Val Vista, Bernal, Ken Mercer is even larger. There's multiple, so there are, we have 46 parks, as Giacomo mentioned in his opening comments. There's not a restroom in every park currently.
May I ask while you're here? There was mention of the aging pool equipment. If something were to happen to that, where does the repair come from? The money for the repair?
It will come from general fund.
General fund.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions from the committee on planning and building?
I got one good question. Did we go back to the planning and building sheet? I think it's like one back. So, the consultant contract savings, for the planning department is, valued at 450,000. Okay. But if we go back to the internal services and operational support slide, the contracted services for that department is also 450,000. But that has like 8 divisions or something. It includes the city attorney's office and the city manager's office. So the cost savings on consultant services is the same from one department to something that has like many facets and many divisions. Right, so, yeah. Right, and that's all that we can get out of internal services.
Well, it's a good question, and I'll ask our planning and building staff to speak more specifically to the reason for, the reason behind the number for the plan checking contracts.
I'm not sure if it's a planning and building thing. I wonder if it's an internal services question.
Well, I was gonna say, on the internal services side, we actually, for purposes of this exercise, so these numbers are rounded up, and there was an effort made to include in internal services those things that are related to the, sort of how we provide operational support to the organization and not tied to specific programs and services, where there were sort of consultant costs associated with providing specific programs and services. Those were not included in internal services, and they were sort of applied to these different areas where they're associated with like providing a specific service like plan checking. Yeah, and Jen's going to talk about the cost behind the reason for that cost.
Right, so the bulk of that 450,000 is in our building and plan check on-call contracts. So that's when we receive an application, it could be something as big as like the workday project or somebody's home addition, where in certain circumstances, either because the amount of time it would take or the ability of our staff to address it right away, we would utilize our consultant services to send them to do the plan check, or perhaps, we have an inspector who's out on leave, or, whatever reason, we might have somebody come in to fill and complete those inspections. So it is a high dollar amount, but we are taking in fees that offset that. So our permit fees our consultants receive a portion of the permit fees when we send out a plan check to be reviewed. So I think it's just it's a volume, because kind of to your question, our plan check, our building revenues are in the, 2 to 3 million range for those fees. And so this is a portion that comes out of those fees, but it is all general fund.
And then I think when you're asking about the internal service, you're just looking at a completely different set of contracts and a different scope of work.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on this program and service area? We'll go to the last one. All right, seeing none. So the final category is library and recreation, community support, and human services. This covers a broad array of programs that are provided primarily by our library and recreation department. So around all the services provided by our library, we talk a lot about how Pleasanton is a full service city, unlike other cities. We do own and operate our own library. We fully staff it and we incur all the costs associated with doing that. And our library provides a wonderful array of programs that are really heavily used and appreciated by the community who are sitting in our library right now. This also includes recreation programs, art programs at the Firehouse Arts Center, the Senior Center, as well as parking facility rentals, which is also handled through the Library and Recreation Department, and sports and aquatics. So we have two different categories of reductions here. The first is library and recreation services. So the first category, again, a large impact item, is to reduce our weekly library hours from 62 to 40 and close the library 2 days a week. Another sort of more operational proposal is to combine our library and recreation service desks. Currently, there are separate desks with separate staffing to provide library and recreation services to the public. This proposal would combine those desks, which would result in fewer service desks. It could increase some wait times during busy times, but it might actually enhance service by providing simple one-stop access for the public at one location. And then restructuring our recreation programs. This would be an overall sort of operational restructuring of how recreation programs are provided. The largest impact to the community would be a reduction in events and programs, and then a change in how adult sports are handled to convert adult sports, which is softball, basketball, and bocce, from sort of city-run, city-managed programs to athlete-organized programs. And there's significant costs associated with that of around $650,000. And then this large bucket, this is our final category, is what we call community support and human services. And this touches on a few different departments, including economic development, library and recreation, and actually some contracts like crossing guards that are managed by our police department. So reducing business partner support funding. So this is an economic development items, which is reducing partner support to organizations that advance economic development, like the Downtown Association, the Chamber of Commerce, reducing our support and subsidies for various community organizations like the Veterans Parade, the Museum on Main, TV30, Tri-Valley Community Television, reducing or eliminating our youth and civic arts grants, which is a small grant program that's administered to provide small grants to civic arts and youth organizations, restructuring and reducing our housing and human services grants. We actually contribute a significantly higher subsidy amount for housing and human services than some of our neighbors. So this proposal is to reduce that, to bring it more in line with what neighboring cities are doing. And then finally, reducing hours at the Firehouse Arts Center and the Senior Center. That's presented as two different items because we know that when we talk about this with the community, there could be different sort of pieces of feedback, different groups that are interested in giving feedback on this. It's important to note, as Director Murphy talked about staffing in the Library and Recreation Department, even though we have two different line items for reducing Firehouse Arts and Senior Center hours, that's actually covered by the same set of staff in the Library and Recreation Department. So if those were to be advanced as a recommendation, we would need to look at reducing both hours at both of those facilities. And then finally, reducing or eliminating the city-funded school crossing guard program. Again, this is something that's been discussed with the school district. The city actually carries a fairly large contract, around $650,000 per year, to pay for crossing guards at, I believe, 23 locations. I know the traffic engineers here. You can answer questions about this. And so this is an expense that's borne solely by the city at this time. So there are different alternatives for this that have been discussed, some of them publicly, including looking at things like volunteers, which is how some other jurisdictions do, looking at potential cost sharing models with the district, although we know, of course, that the PUSD school district is facing significant budget challenges of its own, which have been publicly discussed. So that brings us to the end of our program of service reduction list. So we'll pause for questions on these final two categories, and then we'll get into the exercise soon.
I have a question, just a simple question on the Firehouse Arts Theater. So this reduction went touch actually the regularly paid for photos, and this one saw a concert there.
Yes, it would touch those. So they, yeah, so the reduction, we currently have two separate staff that run these two facilities. So the idea to achieve cost savings is you'd have to get to basically a single, similar to the library, right? Going from a multi-shift type scenario to a single shift type scenario to save money. The same would be here. So you'd have one staff team that would do half senior center, half firehouse, so you'd split the week. You definitely lose talent, right? Specialty talent in both of those areas, but our theater programs, the ticket price you pay is not currently covering the full price of the program. So again, back to the master fee schedule and looking at our fees and how we're recovering costs matters.
When these say reduce, like the housing and human services specifically, this 50%, the other they reduced, is that to prior year level? It's not elimination, it's just reduction.
So the proposal here would be to reduce our subsidy. We are way higher than our neighboring cities with our general fund subsidy. So we all provide pass-through monies to the federal services neighbors. But for example, right now we're providing $267,000 in general fund subsidy on top of that. Whereas Dublin provides 80,000 and Livermore, I believe, at 99,000. So we're way higher than our neighboring cities on that general fund support. So this gets us back in line with our neighboring cities. And then the youth and civic arts grants, this is really just like when we look at an impact of $100,000, people are submitting for stickers and bracelets and marketing materials. The impact, we're just not seeing it here because the grants are so small.
But with, like, say, for example, the firehouse where the 250,000, it doesn't mean there's none. It just means instead of 500, it'll be 250 or something like that. There's a reduction.
Yeah, so we're going from 5 days a week to 3 days a week of service, and that's the reduction there. So just really scaling back programs at both facilities and these reductions.
Thank you.
Do you have other questions from the committee in this category?
I have another.
Sure.
So with the library, you said close it 2 days a week. Was there a conversation about reducing hours instead of closing, or is that?
It is a reduction of hours. The only way you get to a significant cost savings is to get to a single shift staffing model. And so you go to a 5-day week instead of a 7-day week model, 40 hours instead of 62. I think, you know, there's a lot of community impacts to that though, because there's no perfect set of 40 hours. When you're used to 7-day a week access, evening access, we do have heat maps that we have in the, you know, for tracking who's here when, and there are definitely times that are busier than others, but there's no 2 days that are not busy.
Thank you.
With the crossing guards coming out of the police budget, my question is, why is it falling under here rather than under the police line items? With the other community support services that the police department provides?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's just how people think about crossing guard services. Most people don't think about the police department running that program. It is in the police department budget. It's carried there. It started, you know, I believe the low 200s or maybe high $100,000 many years ago. And post-COVID really increased significantly. To your very specific question, we're just trying to make this as obvious and clear to folks as possible. If you're thinking about community support and human services, you're more likely to think about crossing guards than you are to think about the police department and how that interacts. So you're completely right. It lives in there now, and it's how we in the city think about it, but it's not how most people in the community will think about it.
Thank you.
I'm a slow learner, so forgive me. I have kids, I take part in these programs. if we completely cut these programs, then I'm gonna go to Livermore and Dublin and San Ramon to enroll my kids in their programs. So I'm gonna be giving revenue that I could keep in the city to surrounding cities. So again, understand the city council has to approve the fee structure, the term that you use for it, but are we in a situation where if the city council does that first and increases the cost of the programs, that we can still preserve and maintain those programs in the city?
There's also what the market can bear. So we comp with our neighboring cities and we're in line on most all of our programs. Field use fees, we were definitely not in line, but we do, for most of our programs, we are comping with our neighboring cities. And if you raise above, you're exactly right. They're gonna go to Dublin, they're gonna go to Livermore. We don't have it, they're gonna go to Dublin or Livermore. So it's tricky, right? You can't price yourself out of the market either, the fees.
But if we cut it down, then I'm going by default, I have to go.
Correct. You have to go somewhere else.
Okay, so the money will fall out of the city.
Yeah, so all of these include a revenue impact with them. So what you're seeing is the total of all the costs less the revenue we receive, which gets you your savings.
Do you have any other questions from the committee?
I'm still learning like you, so hopefully you can help me understand. When I've had to go, it's not specific to your function, so when I've had to do.
Sorry, this is really soft.
There we go. Sorry about that, thanks, Sam. So when I've had to do large budget cuts more on the corporate side, and I think there's a lot of similarities here, often we'll look at OT, overtime. We'll look at what could we outsource and where can we do something cheaper. We look at what are the low performers in the organization, and I would, and this is a sensitive subject, you put 500 people in a room and you're going to have some low performers, whether it's government, whether it's corporate, and so those are often areas you can get some savings. I don't see us tackling those, and so I might be missing something. The other one is where I'm challenged is I want to try to take the emotion as much out of this decision as possible. So when you see something like reducing fire or reducing police, I mean, that kind of gets, it's like, nobody wants to get rid of safety. Hopefully I won't get arrested as I'm driving home. But nobody wants to get, that's kind of, it's a little bit emotional in a sense that, we can't get rid of safety. Where I'm challenged is, I don't know how our fire, how our police, how our parks and recs compare to other cities similar to ours. Not just San Ramon, not just Dublin, not just Livermore, but, I just did a quick search and there's like 130 cities that have between 60 and 100,000 people in California, if my numbers are close. And so I don't have those metrics to be able to compare, is our police high, is our parks and recs high, or is it low? And that's where I'm challenged in order to kind of make some of these decisions. And then the other one is, what are the metrics on usage? Where are the, my wife loves to swim, and if the pool goes away, I'm gonna have to hear about it. But if that is a low usage area, then maybe we should be getting rid of some of those things. And so, and I saw some of the feedback from Tuesdays where people will say, oh, we can't get rid of senior stuff because, and so how do we look at some of the usage metrics to know where is the best value for our money and where are some of the areas that this area isn't used much? That's where we should get some savings. So that's where I'm challenged on making some of these decisions.
Director Murphy's gonna go here, but we've done that. That's the work that you're seeing here in front of you tonight. I'll speak a little bit to some of the more general things, and then I'll let Heidi dive in where she needs to with the utilization of the data. What you're getting tonight is the benefit of the executive team's best thinking about the services and programs that we currently offer that are considered essential, core, police and public safety, I won't speak for Chief Avalar this evening, but what you're seeing on the board tonight are things that we have that are either nice to haves or things that are expensive and that we value. We appreciate all of these things. The ARU program is phenomenal for us. But it's on the board tonight because it is a nice to have for communities. It's not essential in terms of core service for a police department, despite the fact that as we move into the mental health and support benefits of that program are phenomenal for the city. So, but it's not deep, it's not control. And we want to keep those things. Our police department we have that data. We are for our city, for a population our size, we are at the lower end in terms of police officers per 1,000 people. Our fire department is similarly lean. Our fire chief could come up and talk about the fact that we had more police officers more firefighters many years ago than we do today. Our Parks and Rec department, you heard Giacomo earlier, he's completely correct. We haven't added staff, we've added a lot of park space and park land. And so what you're getting tonight is the benefit of the executive team's best work to put forward programs that are on the nicer to have or underperforming side of things. And I'd like to speak to some of your questions about performance and how you evaluate reductions. We're in a labor environment where there's a lot of rules and procedures that some of the private sector partners don't have. And so we'll be working through that as well, which is why what I said earlier matters a lot. We're using vacancies and other opportunities to be able to make moves over time. So I'll let Director Murphy, and then I'll be happy to answer. It looks like Chief Avalar would like to add to that.
So I will share that when on the previous slide, the restructuring of the recreation division really takes all of our underperforming programs and groups them with a whole chain of vacant positions. So coordinator, supervisor, manager, and fold them together so that we can reallocate staff to higher performing programs. Our busiest facility, we track everything. Our busiest facility is the library, followed by the senior center, followed by the aquatic center. The aquatic center is just expensive. It's not because it's not highly used. It's not because it's not an important resource. It just costs a lot of money to run an aquatic center. So we do track data, and we did in this instance try to come up with some things that just make a lot of sense, right? So grouping your underperforming programs, grabbing a chain of people who are already vacant and reallocating, combining service desks is another area. We have vacancy savings in this space. Combining the service desk creates more efficiency. We could do that. We are in a labor environment. It does take renegotiating job titles and things like that. So it's not can happen tomorrow type thing. And then the reduction of services that are proposed are because we know people value those areas. Those buildings exist, and if we can try to provide something while still getting some cost savings. So none of these are perfect. I mean, some of them are great and could be easy wins, right? But some of them are really difficult. And there is a lot of impact. So I'll turn it over to Chief Avalar.
I just want to answer your question and give you a little insight into the overtime question, because it probably is the safety side. If we're living on overtime, it is a horrible situation. No one wants to. Everyone is so burnt out. They're not with their families. The money is not why they're here. We have minimum staffing is why they're here. And typically what that equals is not enough staffing, so we have salary savings. And so even though you see an overtime, it's probably, you're either paying out of your salary or you're paying out of your overtime. So sometimes it can be deceiving. And in any department, in order to authorize overtime, there's a chain of events that have to happen. And so we're very stingy with our overtime. And sometimes, like I said, we live on it. Like we might be fully staffed. We actually work for one day. But what that looks like is 6 injuries and 6 people in training, and then people are on, so operationally, it's not, the numbers aren't there. And so people have to go to training, or they're ill, or they're sick or injured. And so, so yeah, the overtime looks like on Transparent California, I think someone said, but it's really an impact, a physical impact on our employees. So we actually don't want to live on, we want people to say, man, I want overtime. That's the goal. Did that help a little bit with the overtime question?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's the challenge of being able to kind of look at all these things and say, all right, where's the best to cut? And I kind of rely, you guys have much far more experience in this than I do. And so I'm trying to reconcile where do I come at it in order to get to that? You know, I rely more on you guys because you should know your business really well. So that's where I'm just kind of trying to balance that out. So thank you.
I'll just add to the overarching question, the municipal services review or management review is a tool that a lot of cities use because over time, it's, as you all know, it's really hard to reduce something. It can be easier to add things and it happens year after year after year where we do new things. Community really appreciates those things and we rarely go back. And I'm not sure our organization for a long time has gone back. We've done things like consolidate departments to try to create efficiencies. We recently put together our operations services group and our engineering group. Director Murphy oversees library and recreation. That is also a consolidation that's happened over time. But to really step out of it and have a comprehensive look at citywide operations, staffing levels, projects, programs, services it's an important step and something that I see us doing in the next 18 months. But to get through this 2-year budget, we put our best thinking caps on as an executive team with our managers in our organization, with our labor partners being part of the discussion as well. And we're here today to give you a pretty big potential reduction list, $14.5 million, knowing that we need to come out the other side of this with about a $10 million discussion starting point and some firming up around some recommendations for the city council discussions that are coming.
Relative to this, when you talk about the city sponsorship, like, are you talking about like the Workday Firehouse Arts or Hometown Holiday Parade brought to you by Safeway, like that kind of thing? Okay, thank you.
We actually have a lot of really good ideas, right? Like you could take the $4.5 million renovation at the pool and get someone to sponsor that. You could sponsor a whole season at the Firehouse Arts Center, sponsor the main stage at Hometown Holiday. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but again, not something we can necessarily count on.
Right, thank you.
Final questions on the program and service reduction categories? Hearing none, we'll move on. So as I think was mentioned earlier, we did have a budget town hall for the public earlier this week. It was on Tuesday here in the library meeting room. It was really well attended. We had approximately 90 community members. And the intent of that public town hall was we allowed the community members to first they heard a presentation that was a high-level overview of what the budget process is, how our general fund budget works. And then we gathered public feedback on a very similar list to the one that you see on the wall here. The only difference between what we presented to the public and what we're presenting to you here this evening is we didn't go into as much detail in our presentation, obviously about what went into all the program and service reduction categories, and we didn't include the internal services and operations piece because we really wanted the public to focus on giving us feedback on the public facing programs and services. So the information gathered from that public town hall is rolled up really at a really high level here. We're still analyzing that data. It's only been about a day and a half. But the early results are shared here because we wanted them to be available to inform the work of the committee this evening. So of the, we asked the public, we gave them a certain number of dots like we're gonna do with you in a minute, and we're gonna do a little different again with the committee here because we want you to give us input at a deeper level. But what we asked the public to do was to take a look at the program and service reduction proposals that you see behind me on the wall and on your list in front of you, and to just let us know which of them they could either support. So if they could support, we ask them to indicate with a blue dot. If it was something that they opposed, meaning that they didn't want us to cut it. So support means they could be comfortable, they could imagine cutting it or reducing that program or service area. Red means this is very valuable to me, don't cut it. So we gathered quite a few votes from, again, almost 100 members of the community. And the outcome was that about 9 programs showed strong support for reductions. And when we say strong support, that means 75% or more of the responses were for supporting this reduction. So that yields about $3 million in total savings. And that was in planning and building, reducing plan check consultant contracts, the in-person permit center closures, elimination of the traffic calming program and the sustainability manager position, reduction of landscaping services and park streets and facilities, and then reducing the community support housing human services grants, crossing guards programs, and then also restructuring the recreation department, as Director Murphy just shared. They showed medium support for an additional 17 programs. By medium support, meaning 50 to 74% of the responses showed that this was something they would support cutting. That yields about another $6.25 million in total savings. You can see we're almost getting to 10 million with the feedback from the community. And that includes reducing the school resource officer program, the non-emergency support, and the police special programs, reducing park and trail maintenance and janitorial services at city parks and facilities, and reducing business partner support funding and Firehouse Art Center hours and the combining of the library and rec service desks. And then we also heard from the community where they had strong opposition to reducing service areas. And by strong opposition, again, that means 75% or more voted to keep or to not cut this program. And this is on the public safety side, strong support or opposition, I should say, for not cutting these special units or against the fire station closure, against the closure of the pool, reduction of senior center hours and reduction of library hours. So this just gives you a sense of which programs are highly valued by the community. Again, it was about 100 members of the community at the town hall. You know, we have many other community members in that, so it's certainly not a complete sample of the community, but it's an interesting touch point. And we'll be sharing more information as we analyze the data from that town hall, and we'll be adding input from this committee as well, and preparing a report for the city council that's going to go later next month that compiles all of the different feedback we've heard through this community engagement process. So now we're going to get into the activity. So just key considerations as we head into the activity to frame up the kind of feedback that we're looking for from the Budget Advisory Committee. As we've discussed, we're not here tonight to make any final decisions or to build the city's budget. The city's budget is going to be built over the next several months. And ultimately, any decisions made about program or service reductions or any other decisions about how the city's budget is ultimately balanced and what goes into it are going to be made by the city council in a series of public meetings. So what we're really looking for this evening is your prioritization and your input and your feedback on how you would weight and prioritize the service and the program reductions we've talked about this evening. In terms of these 4 major areas. So we talk about alignment with fiscal priorities. Does the reduction protect our core services, reduce equity, enhance our long-term fiscal stability, and allow us to prioritize investing in infrastructure? City Manager Bowden walked through these earlier. Community impact, meaning how will this affect residents? And are there different alternatives or ideas for how we can minimize that impact? Operational feasibility. So how is this going to impact our operations? We talked a lot about some things like closing the pool. And while that could yield savings, it also raises some operational concerns about other costs. And then finally, additional cost saving opportunities. So are there alternative ideas or efficiencies that can be considered? And we're going to want to gather those through this process as well. So the first thing we're going to ask you to do is to please look at the list that we handed out, that Arun handed out earlier of proposed reduction categories in front of you. We are going to ask you to do a little math, which goes deeper than what we asked the community to do at the town hall. But I would ask you to just take the next 10 minutes or so look through that list and just indicate and make decisions about how, if it was up to you, you would, express your prioritization to select from that list to arrive at approximately $10 million, in budget reductions. And you can think about it in a few different tiers. So we're gonna actually, at the town hall, we just gave everyone a blue dot that said you would recommend this for reduction. Because we're getting a little more nuanced this evening, we're gonna give you actually, when it's time to go up and put your dots on the wall behind me, we're gonna give you blue dots and green dots, and we're gonna call that a tier 1 and a tier 2. So tier 1 is something that you are comfortable recommending for reduction. This is something that you would think should be reducing anyways, or that you think would have a minimal impact, or something that you know that we have to make some reductions that you feel comfortable with. A tier 2, which would be a green dot, is something that you would recommend for reduction only if it's absolutely necessary. That would be interesting information, I think, for the city council to have, just to see those 2 categories. And then finally, red dots, similar to the town hall, is something you would want to preserve or you would not recommend for reduction. So I'd say please take 10 or 15 minutes now, look at your lists, think about this, and just try to add it up to 10 million on your list. And when you're done and you're comfortable and you have a list, you can come over here and get some dots from us and you can go record your selections up on the wall. Questions?
Alexa, does the blue need to equal 10 or the blue and the green?
Blue plus green equals 10. Good question. Now. Any other questions? Okay, it's about 7:50 now, so we'll take till about 8 p.m.
Yes.
I'm not going Well.
Hard pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure.
$1 million.
And I better start one. And then this. Section. So we say yes, that was city jobs. So this is.
I never come away. He did do it. The private sounded. And he totally did it. I mean, he totally did it. You know, and they're. But I didn't want to just. But it's just so. It's like every, you know, the problem every year. They really are. They want every year, there was an article, the chronicle, I mean, it's just, but in the open. Yeah, and it's a tool that, you know, and, but I mean, as a chief, you know. You know, it's not even. It's not called something. It's totally different. You mentioned that three times, so it's something that. I mean, in my opinion, yeah.
No, that's good.
I got my. Yeah, you can tell.
No, actually, love to be there.
I would say celebrate. The day after. Yeah, no. The joke. And so I'm sorry, so I talked about. And then something happened goes. And he said.
I can have everyone's attention just for a minute. If I can have everyone's attention just for a minute, I'm gonna give some instructions about voting. So I think when you're ready to go up, put your votes on the board. If you could please, come over here, we'll give you one strip of red dot, and we'll give you as many blue and green dots as you need to get to your attendance. So remember to get those blue dots, everything.
That's what they like that.
Yes, I think.
Yes, your retirement. Now that. I mean, and I.
We are, our dots.
Study on this.
Good evening. If everyone could please take their seats and we can resume the meeting.
I'm gonna get started again and move into the conclusion of this evening's meeting. So thank you all. Hopefully that was pretty clear. We're not gonna go into too much detail about summarizing the results tonight, but just sharing sort of the high level observations of where we landed. It looks like there was a fair amount of agreement and consistency around supporting reductions in the operational support functions, so in the internal support functions. Internal services, which is maybe not too surprising, but interesting to see. Looking down at police and fire, that's where we probably see a lot of concentration of red dots. So a lot of opposition to reducing those programs and a fair amount of alignment along those lines. Moving into planning and building and parks and streets and facilities. It's an interesting mix here, but we can see there's kind of towards the top of the page, there's more of a predominance of support for reductions in some of those areas around planning and building, traffic calming, plan checking. When you get down to the parks, streets and facilities section around things like closing the pool, reducing services at parks and maintenance at parks, you start to see more different perspectives there and less consistency. And then finally, on library and recreation programs, interesting, quite a bit of support for reductions there too. Pretty much down the line, probably with the biggest predominance of reds around the larger impact items around closing the library and reducing library hours. So it's interesting to see, I think it'll be interesting as we work up the report to see how this is similar and different from the community feedback we gathered on Tuesday. And I think an important thing to note is we didn't ask the community on Tuesday to add up to $10 million. We just asked them to express their opinions on what they supported or didn't support. So I think this is an interesting exercise, and that I think as we go deeper, we start to see sort of the challenge in having to select some trade-offs and maybe look at revenue services a little more critically. When you're trying to actually arrive at a reduction target number. So we're going to pause there. We're going to take public comment on this item, and then we'll go around the committee and we'll ask for any final thoughts or comments about the activity and what we can see up on the board behind us. So, Aaron.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager Jeffers. At this point, we're going to open up public comment for this item. So on the expenditure reduction strategies, if there's anyone in the public that would like to speak up.
Do I need to fill out a card?
You can do it after. Yeah. You can come up, and you have to turn the mic on in about 3 minutes.
I don't know how to do that. I think it's the button.
Sorry. It's the button. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for volunteering your time. So important. I just really have a couple of questions that I hope that you guys are thinking about or have been thinking about as we go through this process. One thing kind of stood out to me, and don't take any offense at this fire department, please. But it seems to me that the police department had quite a few buckets that they were looking at for cost reduction strategies. And the only thing that fire had was a fire station. So it begs the question, does fire not have programs that could have been looked at for cost reductions? It just seemed like a weird anomaly to me. The other question that I really have, and maybe it's not so much of a question, but I attended a city council meeting in 2024 where crossing guards were part of that council meeting. And at the time, the council agreed and voted that they would only extend the crossing guard contract for 1 year. giving the school district time to plan and prepare to take over that role themselves. And yet we're still talking about this money being in the budget, and I'm wondering why. Thank you.
I think if I might, I'll answer the first question first. The fire department, your assertion is correct. There are fewer programs and services that are offered. It's also significantly harder to get the dollar amounts. But I would say that in some of the operational efficiencies there, the fire department did contribute in those areas. And so they weren't called out separately in the public safety bucket, but they were rolled up in other areas as more operational efficiency matters. The crossing guard program, there's been no definitive decision by the city council at this point to officially remove crossing guards and that service. And so it is still in the budget. The districts, as you all are likely aware, are having financial issues as well, and it's not looking like that's going to be something that is covered by the school district. And so the goal here is to find alternatives. We're talking about yes and no from a city budget perspective, but there may be other ways to provide those services, and other communities around us do it differently than we do. So there may be opportunities there.
Good evening, and thank you guys for volunteering your time. Just a couple comments that I have based on the presentation from the town hall Tuesday plus tonight. Why does it have to be all or nothing? You know, if you can't afford steak or filet mignon, you don't stop eating. You just go buy lesser quality meat or find a different food group to eat. So that's number one. So I think, you know, talking about closing the pool, the aquatic center, you know, I think that falls into the same category of, because we can't afford it, we close it down. There's got to be other alternatives. And I think something, and I have no idea about finances when it comes to the aquatic center. But it was stated tonight that to maintain the pool, it's not in the best condition at this point, and it really needs some help. Well, why not close it for a year and take that 1.2 mil that it needs to run and put it into rebuilding it? And then a year down the road, we don't have, we aren't as bad off when it comes to the pool. And I don't know the financial aspect of that. But why can't something like that be considered? At least it would give those that really love the pool something to look forward to in a better facility, with knowing full well that it would be coming back. You know, when you're renovating your house, you're out of commission with a bathroom or you're out of commission with a kitchen. You would just figure out ways to manage it. And I think that's a possibility, possibly. I don't know. And I think that, the other question I had, it was mentioned that there's 21 frozen positions within staff. What's the impact? What has the impact been without those positions being filled? Nobody even talks about it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I want to be as responsive as we can be, and appreciate the comments. I'll start with the employee the employee impact. Those vacant positions are across the organization, and they're having service impacts. They're having they're creating from our employees about how we continue to deliver the same level of services with fewer people. We worked really hard with our public safety staffing to make sure that critical positions for essential services where we have minimum staffing requirements have been met. But certainly I won't get into specific impacts tonight. I'm happy to have a conversation with you about different operational impacts in different departments, and frankly, how it affects our relationship with our partners in our labor groups, because often people are being just, the seats next to you are empty, so you have to do more. And that's the position that we put ourselves in when we're not filling positions on an ongoing basis. That is something that we want to resolve as quickly as we can. The all or nothing statement, I would just remind folks that we still have $150 million budget. We're still operating a full service city, and a lot of the things that are on the list this evening are things that no one wanted to put on the list. It is a matter of making sure that if we talk about a service reduction, the dollar amount that goes with it, sort of trimming around the edges in a lot of cases doesn't yield the savings. There are places where we may be able to split the hair and have those conversations moving forward about how much we reduce and where. For example, a neighborhood traffic calming program, we may be able to do something there that doesn't get rid of the entire program. But there are other areas that do need a full, the full reduction is necessary to yield the savings. Yeah, I think the pool maintenance idea, it's an interesting, there's room for us to continue to explore options, and that's why we're having these kinds of discussions. The pool maintenance program, it's a multi-million-dollar exercise right now to revamp our pool. And so it'd be nice if everything kind of neatly fit together, but they don't oftentimes, and the level of reductions that are necessary to meet we can't reduce our way out of our infrastructure issues and challenges. There's sort of an operating budget issue, and there's a facilities maintenance and capital program series of issues. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to tackle all of that along the way. I was gonna say this till the end, but I'll just give you some concluding thoughts. All the people here who are on city staff, there's no joy in this. There's no, this is not why we all joined public service. A great friend and mentor of mine talks about cities building community, and they've talked about it physically, from a social, emotional perspective. We build community is sort of a motto or credo that he lived by. And I see this as, I can look at this with a really sort of stoic lens that says that to build community, you have to have a strong financial foundation and be in a really solid place. But to hear and see the feedback and to understand the impacts and go through this and sort of unpack it, it doesn't feel like building community right now, despite the fact that we need to live within our means for the time being. And so this is not easy for anyone. There's nothing up here that's a slam dunk, easy solution to the financial situation that we're in, and just appreciate everybody bringing their perspective and ideas to where we are. We'll find a way through this, but it's not gonna be an easy time or easy discussions.
Thank you, and as I see no one else getting up to give a comment, I'm going to close public comment on something.
Great, thank you. So before we move on to our conclusion, we just wanted to go around the committee and just give everyone one final opportunity to make any comments or ask any questions about the process, about sort of what we see as the preliminary results. So we'll start over here, Committee Member Arkin, with anything to share.
Well, first, I just want to thank staff for pulling this all together. All the material, it seems like it's well organized, well thought through. And, the report that you showed this morning, at the beginning of this meeting, was that basically for the last, year, you guys have been doing a great job to manage the city budget, so thank you. I think the dots speak for themselves. So I'm really fine. Thank you.
Lots of questions before, so just I echo the thank you to everyone for the hard work.
A little bit off topic from what we discussed tonight. Can I ask a question about unfunded liability? Can you go into a little bit of detail about kind of the background and history of unfunded liability? How much is in the account? Are we currently still putting money in? How much that is? And then what are we doing with those funds? It's anticipated to do with the funds. Just kind of go into the background and why we have it, and maybe some of the mandates also.
Unfunded liabilities are related to pension and retirement benefits. There are many reasons why they're not fully funded. For example, adverse investment loss, right? And that impacts our unfunded liability. And other factors like demographic factors like, changes in life expectancy, COLA, and all of these other factors that help us use to build the, to project the benefits for companies also contribute to the liability. And oftentimes you just don't have money to fund the liabilities, completely. So what we do and what other cities do is that they contribute towards, based on the amounts covered by commercial actual, right? And you pay into the accounts every year, say 20 or 30 years, hopefully you will pay down those liabilities. And currently, the city has about 53 million in the pension trust to offset that liability. And for the OPEC trust, we have about probably 70 or 80 million right now. But as of fiscal year 2024, our unfunded liability total is still over 200 million without the pension trust funds.
We're currently still putting into those funds, correct?
Not the trust funds, not the pension trust. We made some initial contributions and we have generated some income over time. For the open trust, we are not funding now, but do generate investment income that maintain in those accounts.
Okay, so no money's going into the unfunded liability funds at all?
We do pick covers every year, so we get billed for the unfunded liability contribution, so we make payments every year.
And is there any savings to not pay those?
There is no saving, you'll end up. It's like a mortgage, if you don't pay your principal, you get charged for additional interest.
And I'll add, because we put together a lot of information over the last year and a half. We've shown how those CalPERS pension payments have increased. We were at 11 million around 2017. I think it was 22 million this past year annually in payments. And we're still 78% funded.
Not for pension, so for the fire and miscellaneous plans, right, it's only 64% and 65% funded. The P plan is that is
Yeah, I just want to thank all the staff for being here and all the volunteers, and I think it's a learning process, and I think I learned something tonight, so thank you.
Yeah, so those thoughts, nothing else. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for your guys' time, and I appreciate the exercise. I thought it was very beneficial.
I also want to say thank you for your time, and I thought that this exercise was very beneficial.
Last guy, everybody's gonna be blowing their eyes, get us out of here, I'll try to be quick as I can. One of the threats that's identified by Knight Bailey was the lack of understanding of what's happening essentially. And I think something that may be helpful, it will be helpful to me and maybe others, would be to we have the audited financial statements now, thank you for that. To be able to take those, the final results in as simple a way as possible. There's nothing simple about city finance, I get that. But to be able to say, here's what June 30th of 24, and here's what is going to happen, what we're predicting is going to happen in the future, and this is why we have the problem. It'll be revenue issues, there'll be cost of living adjustments for compensation, whatever it is, to be able to just very as simply as possible, maybe a one-page summary, and it's not going to go into as much detail as some people would want. I just think that would help address that threat. And then in general, when it comes to public art, the city manager mentioned earlier the importance of beauty in the city. When you talk about letting landscaping go or closing down parks, it can be a very unvirtuous cycle with what happens when the city gets ugly. You've seen it happen across the country. So I really caution the the reduction of some of the things, even if you're only going by 40 miles an hour to see the median, that stuff matters and has an impact on the city psychologically, and it has an impact on safety, so, that's it for me, thanks.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the item and move on to the next item, which is the review of the budget development. And so the calendar, we went over it a little bit at the first meeting, but this is kind of the next items that are coming up. So this Tuesday, at our city council meeting, we'll be discussing the mid-year budget. And then on Thursday, we have a budget workshop. That'll go in depth more about the financial forecast and have representatives there as well to discuss it. In March, we will have the community and the budget advisory committee input analyzed, and also have the city council budget workshop. Number 3, in April, the city manager will develop the proposed budget. May is the proposed budget presented to the city council. And June is when we'll have the final budget adoption. At this point, the committee will take any questions before opening up to public comment, and then final comments as well.
To confirm, the March budget advisory is March 4th.
So actually, in our next item, we'll be talking about a potential March meeting. As currently today, right now, the next scheduled meeting is April 2nd, yes. But in the next item, we will be talking about potentially adding another one.
So the budget advisory 3 is April 2nd.
Yes, that's correct.
So if committee member Gillette, if I can ask you to hold that for a moment, or unless, if there are other questions, happy to take them now. If not, we'll advance to the next slide, and maybe this is where we can have a little bit of conversation. So just to be clear, March 4th is when the council is going to have an update from Foster and Foster, the actuary, to talk about OPEB and pension trust. This group to be aware of and maybe watch if you want to do that. That's March 4th. As assistant to the city manager, as well as said, our next scheduled meeting is April 2nd. But as I hear the conversation this evening, I've heard city manager Bowden make a reference to potentially there might be some additional information we want to bring back to this group. I wanted to test your potentially willingness and or availability for a meeting in March. Because we're 6 weeks from now until the beginning of April, right? And I think there might be some more information we'd love to share with you. And so, is there just general show of hands or nodding heads? Is there willingness to have another meeting in March if we can find a date?
What would be the objective of that and maybe the
It
outcome?
might potentially, well, so we're building this plane as we fly it, Brian, but, conversations about use of pension trust. Right, that might inform the council as they go to make that decision as part of their deliberation. And there might be other budget related issues that come out of the next couple of meetings. So that would just be helpful if there was an interest. A willingness, yeah. But you notice on your agenda, thank you for that. You notice on your agenda, we targeted March 13th. I will tell you to find a date that works for all of you and all of us. And if I get a room that doesn't have a commission meeting or a committee meeting or some other activity in it, is not the easiest thing to do in the world. I know when I put down the 13th after that, I was told by one of my colleagues that I was acing them out of being able to participate because they have another commitment. But if you'll allow us a little bit of grace to find a time that works in the cadence of what we're doing with council and for you all, so that we can bring it back at an appropriate time, and then we'll reach out to you and make sure we can settle on a date that works for the most people. If that's okay, and hopefully everybody. Sound like a plan? Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I'll open public comment for the items 6 and 7. So reviewing the budget development calendar and then future meetings. If there's anyone in the public that would like to make a comment about them. We'll say enough for public comment. We will close public comment, and we'll have final comments, from the committee on items 6 and 7 before, go to adjournment?
No comment.
Seeing no comments, we will adjourn.
Sorry, I waited for it to go around. Just in your calculus, and it shouldn't be determined everything, but, the 13th is the Three Valleys Community Foundation state giving event, so there'll be some folks there.
Thank you for that. You know, sense of that it's, I'll look at the calendar and I'll scrub it and we'll do our very best, right? But appreciate the note. We're trying to do our best to make sure all of you can attend.
And with that, I will adjourn at 8:47. Yeah.